Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutchaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Kelli Thompson. She's a leadership coach and the author of a book called Closing the Confidence Gap. Can you say hi, Kelli?
Hello. Thanks for having me. It's so good to be here.
Yes, I appreciate you finding me, and I think it's what you're talking about is confidence. A lot of people in general, mostly women, we have confidence issues. Even, I shouldn't say that, but people tell me I look confident all the time, but sometimes inside I'm not.
Yeah, I know the
And,
feeling.
I'm just curious what got you down the path of being a leadership coach, and I'm sure that led you to writing this book.
Yeah, 100%. Let's just kind of start from the beginning. I think
Okay.
maybe some folks will resonate with this, but like when I
Yeah.
was a little girl, I loved reading. And I always thought that someday I would write a book. And, when I was in my Sweet Valley High or Babysitters Club series, right? I'm sure we all had something we loved, but I just never really knew what I was going to write about. And, I followed all the rules. I went to high school, graduated, I went to college and got a good stable job, at a bank because it has good benefits and security, all the things you're supposed to do. And I'm putting supposed to in quotation marks. And, as I was kind of accelerating in my career, like I still had this nagging thing where I wanted to write a book, but I just didn't know what it was going to be about. And I even remember, most of my career in banking was, I was in male dominated fields. In that time, it was not uncommon for me to be one of the only women in the room. I'd been in finance. When I looked up at our senior leadership team, they were all men. And so I even remember sitting in my boss's office one day and we were talking about just our dreams and goals. And I was like, oh, I've always wanted to write a book. I said, but I don't know what it's going to be about. But I told her, I said, it will definitely not be a leadership book ever. Because, at the time, this was like 2008, 2009. And still to this day, if you Google leadership books, the majority of the things returned are going to be books written by men. Stephen Covey, Jim Collins, Jack Welch, some of the popular authors at that time. So it was just a place I just couldn't see myself entering into, not unlike the leadership team, in my bank where there was no women. I just couldn't see myself entering into that, right? There just was no women in the leadership team. And so as I continued on in my career, I left banking. I went to go work for a technology company. It was a little more creative, a little more innovative. And then I actually went to go work for an author and a leadership development consulting firm. And so, seeing her be an entrepreneur, seeing her as an author, like really helps me open to my eyes to say, oh gosh, like this could be a thing. Like, I think it helps when you see someone. And then in 2019, in my leadership consulting role, I was traveling all over the country doing training and development, leadership development. And I was really tired of traveling because I was on the road like 50% of the time. And I was a mom. My daughter was getting into middle school. And when sometimes kids are that age, they start to get involved and you're just bummed you're missing it out. I had been remarried. And so I just wanted to be home more. But one of the things I loved about my job a lot was the one-to-one coaching that I was doing. And so I talked to my boss about, hey, can I stop traveling so much and just focus on coaching? And she said, that's not an area of the business I want to be in. But however, if you want to go off on your own and try this thing, I'd be happy to share this client with you that you can kind of take to kind of get you started and give you a baby step. So I made the brave leap and I left corporate and I went out into entrepreneurship in 2019. And then over the course of going through the pandemic and dealing with all the challenges that came to my business from there, I decided that, I really wanted to focus my practice on coaching women, especially women in corporate. Women who are, accelerating in their careers, but maybe feel like, gosh, I'm kind of getting to a level of the ladder where I'm starting to doubt myself, or maybe I am the only woman, or I need more confidence. Or, I really loved helping women with career changes. I'd made a lot of career changes. And so in 2020, I kind of had just this aha because I had developed this women's leadership program. And I was like, oh, I could make this a book and then it would be accessible to more people. And so like, that's kind of the long story short of how I wrote the book. I said I would never write is I just really leaned into a lot of my experiences of leading training programs, leading women, being the only woman in the room. And then just through some of that organic evolvement of leaving corporate and starting my own practice, like that's just how the book came to be. And it's called Closing the Confidence Gap. And we can talk more about what's in that, but it does talk a lot about how, we can find more confidence in leading at work and some of the systemic issues that are at play today that keep women from showing up as their most confident selves.
That's an amazing background. And I think waiting to write the book probably was a better idea than doing it too soon, because you have more authority based on the experiences that you shouldn't say authority, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just wouldn't have had the stories. And I think that's what makes a great book, is that it's not just somebody talking at you or telling you what to do, but I really made a commitment to tell deeply personal stories in this book and feature the stories of my clients and people I've worked with. And you're right, I wouldn't have had those had I done it too soon.
Correct. And that's, so it was meant to be to wait. And what all you're saying, a lot of women, definitely, I like that you're focusing on that. We've had to, our generation is just trying to change it a little bit. Like you said, I was in a very, very male dominated industry as well. And I'm just fortunate I had some men that would say, you're going to be, you know, just because you're a woman doesn't mean you're going to be, but I had those men tell me that. There's most men that weren't, saw me as competition. I'm sure you saw that too. And I'm sure the financial industry is a little tough too, right? That you're in. That means
yeah. You know, I was in financial services, and then I spent some time in technology. And, you know, one of the things that I saw, there are men who are amazing allies, and we need more of them. Ones that are willing to pass the microphone, encourage other women to speak up, and recognize and embrace the fact that when they have diverse leadership teams, like, there's so much data that shows organizations are more profitable. But I think sometimes what causes women to kind of like be on the outside looking in is maybe not so much a conscious bias or competition, or it's just the fact that they've been a good old boys club joking about good old boys things on the golf course or at the bar for decades. And so for someone who doesn't come in and talk like them, act like them, joke like them, like, that can be a real threat, is probably the best word I can think of, to kind of the group identity, because they have to change their norms, change their behavior, change their, you know, their conversation style. I actually had a conversation with this with 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐤𝐸. And if you don't know the name 𝐦𝐨𝐬𝐤𝐸, she was the CEO of Pepsi for many, many, many years. And she said herself, she was often the first woman entering into male dominated spaces. And that was a thing, was they had to change their group norms and ways of being to accommodate different styles. And that can be quite an uncomfortable experience when you're just used to showing up in a certain way, for sure.
That's true. I like what you were saying. They have to change their way to communicate with each other. Like I said, I think that's why they were hesitant in the industry I was in to get it. I wanted to be in a sales role. I wanted it so bad because I had a good skill with customer facing, but the other people didn't like it because back then, some of the parties they would have would be at strip clubs. I'm sorry, that's just what it was. And they were like, we can't do that. We can't take Bridget there. Yes. Right. And so I'm not going. So that changed. I mean, that was the norm, unfortunately. It probably still is in some places, but the language thing, I like the way you said that. And it's so good to have. Change is scary, but it's normal at the same time. And you have to have, like what you're doing, the leadership coaching is helping people. You're probably helping people with those transitions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the majority of the transitions that I help my clients with are two things. One, it is accelerating in organizations where maybe they are the only woman in the room, or they look up and they don't see people like them. And maybe it's a person of color, you know, or somebody else with an accent, you know, that can also be another thing. You know, I have a few clients now who've actually said, you know, I have an accent and no one else in my company has an accent, and I'm really self-conscious about it. I mean, there's just little things that we don't think of. And so, you know, one of the places that we always start with is, you know, really just, you know, clarifying your values. And, you know, I often ask women, and this is a line from the musical Hamilton for all you Hamilton fans. You know, one of the things that, you know, Alexander Hamilton says to Aaron Burr is, he says, if you don't know what you stand for, what will you fall for? And so when I'm coaching women, whether it's accelerating in their current organization more confidently, or they're looking for a career change, I often ask them, what do you stand for as a leader? What do you want to be known for? Because that gives you really big clues into what you value. And when you really think about, what do I stand for? What do I know? What do I want to be known for? How do I want to show up as a leader? What's my leadership style? It really helps them embrace those unique qualities that make them them, and really claim their own values so they can stand on that, be known for that when they are in those rooms and they're the only woman. Or if they're looking for a different career, it's, how do I make sure that I'm making a career change And I'm asking the right questions in the interview process to make sure that this company is aligned with my values and we stand for the same things. It's just so important to start there.
I was just thinking that, like, the values of companies that are going to be successful are the ones that are really performing, or they have their values, they understand it's really their foundation, right? And everybody needs to be in line.
Yeah.
In line. That's, I'm trying to.
Well, yeah, I know what you're trying to say. And I always tell my clients, it's never the values they have posted on their internet, because their marketing team did that. Right. And we all know that there's lots of things posted on the interwebs today that aren't always followed through on. So I really encourage folks, especially when they're in the interview process, to ask this organization a couple questions. A good question to discern whether or not they actually live their values or, value what they say they value, is to ask them where they spend their money. So like, let's just say if they're an organization that says they value learning and development. So this was my predicament. I was leading learning and development teams, and I was always struggling just to get peanuts and pennies, to do these programs. And I'm like, I want to go work at an organization that values learning and development and has a budget so we can do stuff, And so one of my questions in the interview process is tell me about your budget for learning and development. I for some reason, I attract a lot of marketing folks, and they kind of run into that too. And they ask, tell me what your marketing budget is. Because what we find is people spend their money based on what they value. And so that's a good question to ask. And you can also ask about how they make decisions. Like, ask them about a recent big change that happened in the organization. How did they make that decision? How did they communicate? Because when they start to talk about the hows, it reveals oftentimes what they actually value in the organization, because you're asking them a question about their behaviors.
That is really good. I never really thought about that. I haven't had interviews in a long time, but that is really, really, really helpful if you're looking for a job. And that's another thing. A lot of us are, we're independent right now. I have my own company. You have your own company. That's a big change, right? And I'm sure that probably scared the heck out of you. It did me sometimes, but I had the confidence from my clients helped me, because it's scary. Like, I think you understand that, right? You're independent now and have your own business.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. So I remember going off on my own, and I was terrified. And, I knew I was in this position where I wanted to stop traveling. Like, no travel was a non-negotiable for me. And I remember thinking, okay, I got a choice. I can kind of take my current little client that I'm working with and just kind of use them. Definitely would not even come close to replacing my salary. It would maybe be 20%, or I could go and interview at other companies and see what I think. And I just remember I was so scared of failing. Like, I was so scared that, oh my gosh, what if I go out and do this and I fall flat on my face and I have to crawl back to corporate? But like, when I went on job interviews, like, my stomach was just upset, and it was rumbly, and it just felt uncomfortable. And when I thought about starting my own business, even though I could like literally fall flat on my face and never make another dollar, like, there was something that was strangely exciting about all of it. Like, I couldn't not work on my website. Like, I couldn't help myself. I was like kind of scheming and putting together potential packages and programs. And so I think sometimes when we're thinking about a really scary decision, like, I want you, if you're listening, to think about, but where's your energy going? Like, are you thinking of making a change, but you're going to interview, or you're thinking of doing something and it makes you feel kind of sick and heavy and right? Or like, does this change feel scary? But there's something in your body that you're like, I just can't stop. Like, I'm just being pulled to it like a magnet. And I think that really helped overcome my fear of failure, is like just trusting that there was like a still small voice in there that said like, this is the right thing. This is the right thing. And so, I mean, that helped, along with, a lot of other things that we can discuss, but I would just really encourage you just to kind of listen to that still small voice.
I like that, because when I was younger, I had people tell me that your instincts, I mean, that's what they were saying. Yeah. Don't listen to your instinct, but I think you're going to be more successful if you listen to yourself, or you know yourself better than others. And I think as a coach, you're helping people realize what they value and what's true to them. Hopefully I said that correctly. And it's so important what you're doing. I think, especially now with all this constant changing with COVID, that was unexpected, but in a way, I see good things came out of it. I mean, I try to look at the you have acknowledged things that were bad, but I see people realizing, what am I doing? Right? If they have a family and they
Yeah.
have children, and you want to be a good role model for them too. And it's not just walking the walk. I think I've read that somewhere. It's you got to be a good example, and you got to understand and be open to, I think a lot of people don't talk about what they're dealing with. And I think that can help hold them back. Holds
Oh
them
yeah.
back.
100%.
How do you reach out? You said you talk to companies and interviewing or talking to people. Do you deal with group coaching or one-on-one? I was just curious on that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I have clients that I work with one-on-one who come to me who might be exploring a career change or wanting more just help with confidence and leadership. I have a group program that I run twice a year as well. It's called the Clarity and Confidence Women's Leadership Program. It's a lot of the things that I cover with my clients one-on-one, but it's just all smushed and packaged in an 8-week program, and it's all online via Zoom, which is nice. But that, talk about 2020 being hard. I mean, that was a byproduct that came out of 2020. When I left and went off on my own, I kind of just did some quick math. I was like, okay, what's my minimum viable income once I stop and unsubscribe to all my subscriptions and my packages, all the things that we don't really need. And, because I knew I would take a pay cut. But when I first started out, I was kind of just taking the business I could get so that I could kind of meet that minimum viable income need. And I was coaching both men and women. And then I was speaking on just some topics. But then when 2020 hit, I was not unlike a lot of other people where 80 to 90% of my income literally dried up in like a period of 3 weeks because any speaking engagements I had canceled. The corporate contract that I carried with me out of corporate to keep me alive canceled because they were laying off employees. And so then therefore they're canceling contractor contracts, which isn't to be expected. They're actually now back as one of my best clients, which is a fun story. But my point in that, telling you that story is, 80 to 90% of my income dried up overnight. My husband and I were going through infertility, kept having miscarriages. And I remember thinking to myself, if things can literally not get any worse. I cannot handle any more loss right now. So I thought to myself, I'm like, if things cannot get any worse and I cannot make any less money, what do I really want to do? What do I really want to do? And that's when I really came up with the thing that I've always loved to do was when I was a leader and women would come into my office and ask for coaching, how do I speak up? How do I negotiate my salary? How do I do this? I loved it. And I'm like, why am I not doing that? And so then towards the end of 2020, I really then shifted. I had kind of I have nothing to lose mindset. So I'm just going to shift all my content to start talking to women. And ever since then, I've never looked back. Everything has just grown from there. The book has come from there, the programs, everything. But I don't think that is unlike the story that a lot of other women have in their lives where maybe they get sick, maybe they lose their job, COVID has happened, they've lost a loved one, and it's really stopped and asked them to evaluate, is this what I really want? Is this even worth it? Is all this hustle and grind worth it? And that's just such a collective reflection right now that I think that we're all in fairly good company.
Right. I think, thinking back to all that, I did some crazy, crazy traveling because I was trying to, I was making money and I had raising sons, and I couldn't do that now because it is exhausting now that you think about it. But at the time I was younger, but I enjoyed it. But then I didn't enjoy it when my kids were older because I wanted to be there. Like you had mentioned, you got to want to be there and support them. And I just thank God had a supportive husband as well. And it's just amazing what you're doing. And I just think, even I mentioned the fear of failure. I still feel that way sometimes, every day. Not, I shouldn't say every day, but because of the unknown. But you got to have a plan too. What do you think about that when you're?
Yeah. So I think yes. So does the fear of failure go away? No.
Right.
I hate to break it to you, but if you are part of the human race and the human condition, there is always going to be something in you that gets a little scared when you're stretching your comfort zone. That's literally just how the ego works. The ego doesn't like change. It doesn't like new things. It doesn't like taking risks. And so anytime you're doing that, which could come from running your own business or asking for a promotion or stepping into a new role, right? There's always going to be that fear of failure. But, I really want folks just to normalize that and even just to name it. I think hopefully us just talking about it and naming it is just so powerful. naming it, noticing it and how common it is, and just normalizing it.
Yes.
Like if you are a healthy human being, you're going to feel doubt and fear. If you don't feel doubt and fear, then you're probably going to be on the next episode of Dateline as the person convicted, right? Like you're probably a sociopath. So I just want you just to say like that fear is just so normal and it's so healthy. And I think a good way to reframe that is just to be like, you know what, this is what growth feels like. Like, this is what, this is what stretching in my comfort zone looks like. And in those moments still today of like, really feeling, oh my gosh, like this could all crash tomorrow. I always have to go back to, but like, what's my network? Like,
Right.
who else can I reach out to? Because I think sometimes when we feel these feelings, we start to isolate instead of opening up and really thinking about, okay, wait, who is my network? Who can I reach out to for support? Or if my business is not going as well as I think it is, or I'm not maybe promoting a project at work as well as I think I am, or I should be, like, who's in my immediate network that I can reach out to and ask for help, ask for support, ask to, promote this, whatever that is. I think sometimes like we forget how important it is to take advantage of that network that we have around us, for sure.
And I think trying to do everything by yourself is not going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tempting to. I know I have that tendency that when I get really nervous or stressed, I isolate, but I'm like, that just never works. And I just have to remember that, like, no, we have to reach out to others.
Right. And they're going to give you some good, good support. And you want to be around people who are going to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just think it's just so helpful what you're doing for women. And I love the idea of the normalizing fear of failure. I'm not sure what to call it, but what do you have a nickname for it?
I just call that, when I think about like feeling failure and feeling doubt and feeling uncertainty, I just go through, I call it my notice it, name it, normalize it, reframe it. It's just kind of like 4 quick steps. I'm like, I just need to notice it with like a ton of compassion. Like, I think sometimes, at least I know in my own experience and with my clients, we start to feel doubt or uncertainty, or our inner critic kind of gets going. And then we like criticize ourselves for it. Like, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. What's wrong with you? And I don't know about you, but I've never met anybody who could criticize themselves into more confidence. And so that's why I'm like, let's just notice it with a ton of compassion. Like, this is just a feeling that needs to be felt. So yeah, noticing it, naming it, normalizing it, reframing it.
And what you're saying, like, don't suppress things either. That can affect, I think, health related.
Oh yeah.
Too. That's kind of something I've dealt with in the past. That's why I'm starting my own business, because I had health issues. I'm like, I'm going to focus on me and my family, and who cares, what money at the time I was making. But I would think not reaching out for help probably can affect stress. I mean,
100%.
Stress is normal, but then you don't want to ignore it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that unfortunately, I think it's getting better. And I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic was we started to normalize the conversation around mental health. Like, yes. Amen. But unfortunately, in too many corporate circles, which is something that I really work with my clients, they don't want to talk about feelings. They don't want to talk about emotions. I have the corporate client who left and came back is just really a pioneer in their space, because they have me come and do these group coaching sessions with all of their employees. And we talk about hard things, and then we talk about feelings, because I think sometimes when we suppress really real feelings like doubt and fear and overwhelm and insignificance and insecurity, like, and then, also sometimes like we only say, well, you can show feelings at work, but only the good ones. Right. But I think sometimes like, or the ones that people have deemed good, I think they're all good, but you're so right. When we suppress those feelings, it leads to burnout. It leads to anger.
Yes.
It leads to resentment between our colleagues, because we have all this thing stuffed inside because I'm so mad at Bridget, like, right. And it eats at us, and it causes health issues. It causes stress. We clench our jaws, we grind our teeth, we have ulcers. And I think just so much of it is because, we don't just stop and notice and name our feelings, and then just have the normalcy to just have conversations about it and reach out to our network and just talk about it. So I wholeheartedly agree that when we stuff this stuff, it comes out sideways. We may not think it does, but it totally comes out sideways.
Well, come and bite you. I mean, funny, but
yeah.
As you were saying that, it made me think of another thing, like perfectionism. That is something that women have, or at least I have in the past, I didn't want to do something unless it was perfect. And I think, this is my opinion, social media can amplify that in a good and bad way.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't be on social media too much because I'm not from that generation. But to me, perfectionism scares people. They want it to be perfect, and they're not trying new things. That's another thing that's probably related to not changing.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. So I think, you know, I talk about this a couple of different ways in my book. The first one is, let's just address the confidence gap. It's actually a study, and that's why my book is called Closing the Confidence Gap, because let's just start at the systemic level of this whole perfectionism thing. So what Wharton did was Wharton Business School did a study because they wanted to understand, why is it that men just seem to have an easier time self-promoting, asking, going for things, right? Seemingly even, right? Less worrying about perfectionism. I always joke, when we think about Kanye West running for president or Elon Musk buying Twitter, they did it not because they qualified. They're doing it because they thought it looked like, oh, this sounds fun, right? I mean, there's just a different mindset there. So anyways, Wharton does this study, and they have men and women take this test. And they did not tell them how they did on the test, but the assignment was based on how you think you did on the test. You're supposed to go and advocate to potential employers and for a role. And then obviously your advocacy will determine how well you get paid. Well, I'm sure it's no surprise to any listener that we can guess who did a little bit better job advocating for themselves. It was the men. But who actually did better on the test? It was the women. And so the researchers said that maybe we should just tell women they did better, and then their confidence will follow. But my argument in writing this book is actually that's not going to cut it. Because I think for women to show up in their full confidence, for women to break the ties of perfectionism, and the only way they can earn things is to be absolutely perfect, is we need to see more women in the rooms where decisions are made. Men see imperfect men in senior roles all of the time. We have exhibit 1A with what's happening today in today's world with what Elon is doing with Twitter, right? Yes. With, politicians that have been men for years who have imperfectly held that role. But for women, we've just never seen ourselves in that space where we've been allowed to make mistakes. And it's well documented that when women do make mistakes, they are more harshly, judged or punished. And so I think something needs to happen at the systemic level. And I advocate for that in my book, to let us all off the collective hook a little bit. So yeah, we need to see more women just being imperfectly awesome people in leadership roles to help us with our own tendencies of perfectionism. But the other thing that I really point to in the book is this is doing our own self-work. So one, having a lot of compassion for ourselves and letting ourselves off the hook. But I think sometimes a lot of perfectionism comes from compare and despair. And you highlighted this so beautifully. We see what's on social media. Oh my gosh, I need to be that. We see one other woman get promoted at work. Oh my gosh, I need to be that to be promoted. I need, all these sort of things. And then we get into this weird compare and despair thing where we're not good enough. And so one of the tools that I offer in my book is really finding your unique talents, claiming your unique talents, your genius zone. Because when we can own what's unique about us, own our unique talents, the easier it is to see the talents in others without the confidence killing effects of compare and despair. Because we know what we bring to the table. Yeah, Bridget, you are talented, you are amazing, and I can still feel good about myself sitting here because you bring those talents and I bring these talents. And so my argument for perfectionism is really twofold. One, we need more women in the rooms where decisions are made, doing things imperfectly amazing. And we also need to do the work to own and claim our talents so that we feel confident no matter what room we're in about what we can contribute without comparing and despairing ourselves.
That's true. As you were saying, I've just ideas in my head. What about the HR people? Is that what you call it? HR? Are there more at companies? Or are they out? I just don't know how they're hiring people now because of COVID. Things have changed. And a lot of people, from what I've read, a lot of them want to be remote.
Yeah.
Hybrid work. Is that the right term?
Yeah. Yeah. The research shows that a lot of people want a choice in where they work. Right. And so what that means is there are some people who want to be at the office. Research does show it tends to be men who have support partners at home if they have children. where the research does show that more women do prefer more of a hybrid or remote work environment, because in our society, women still carry the majority of childcare or elderly care. If you don't have children at home, sometimes you're caring for elderly parents or family members. And so there's just a heavier burden. It's actually called the unpaid workload of women. I also talk about that in my book, where women take on an extra 2 hours a day of unpaid work. And so it's not just human resources responsibility. Having come from human resources myself, we can advise the business. We might execute a lot of the interviews and the hiring processes and talent development processes. But at the end of the day, we are following the strategy for hiring or talent of the hiring manager or the leader. And so for organizations who want a culture change, it always starts with the CEO. It always starts with leadership.
Right. And to be successful, I think they should also listen to the feedback from the human resources, because they're the ones that are on the ground floor with the actual people doing that work.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, this is just amazing what you're doing. Did I miss any other points that you talk about in your book, Closing the Confidence Gap?
Yeah, I can just kind of give a high level of, kind of what folks can take away. So like I said, closing the confidence gap is it's not all on women. The subtitle of the book is Boost Your Peace, Your Potential, and Your Paycheck. And, I talk a lot about how, organizations need to have more women in the rooms where decisions are made, so that women can see what healthy self-advocacy looks like. A lot of the gender likability biases are because we typically haven't seen women. And if you do see women, lots of times they are penalized for the same behaviors that men are celebrated for, like assertiveness, directness, like a bullishness approach to business, like, being unemotional. And, they expect women to show up in a certain way. But what the research shows is that the more women we have in leadership, a lot of those gender norms, those gender likability biases, really are diminished. And so, through the book, we talk about how to name and claim your values so that you can be a confident leader and lead in a way that feels good for you and not just conform to some of the gender norms or ideals that have maybe been present in your organization. I talk a lot about overcoming doubt and imposter syndrome. And even though doubt never goes away, it's more about like, how do we recognize it when it's there and do great things while also feeling doubtful, right? Like what kind of carrying it along with us in our pocket. I help women really discover, like I said, their unique talents, claim their genius zone, really go into their bodies and start trusting themselves, trusting how their body says yes or no. Delegating, shifting their identity from doer to leader, speaking up and advocating at work, asking and negotiating their salaries and their paychecks, and then taking brave next steps. But it's not just, it is a manual for women to do all these things, but in each chapter, I also highlight some of the systemic issues in organizations that are present, because I really wanted this book to be a both and. I wanted to highlight some of the things that are present systemically and call for change. But knowing that we can't change things overnight, like I wish we could change systems overnight. Like I haven't met a person yet who's been able to change a system overnight. So given that, how do we thrive in these systems while also advocating for change? And so that's really the premise of the book. And closing the confidence gap is on the employer, and also it's on us to do our own work as well.
It sounds like it'd be beneficial because you have stories mixed in there with takeaways, and that's going to be really helpful. And this is something I'm going to check out, your book, Closing the Confidence Gap. I think it's a really good idea, especially what's going on right now, and it helped calm us down a little bit. We just need to pause, right? Take a breath.
Yeah.
and read and learn from other people. I think that's why stories are so helpful.
Yeah. And that's really the goal of the book. Was I just wanted to tell out stories, but give practical tips, because, and I think I say at one point in the book, there will be tools. Yes. Do I tell you exactly what to do? No, because you just made a really excellent point. Like, we also need to take this time of pause and reflection and everything that's happened for us to go inside and really discover for ourselves what is ours to do. Not just follow along blindly with what other people think we should do, or just follow someone else's well-meaning advice, but really go in and ask ourselves, like, what do I want? What do I need? What's right for me? What's mine to do? And that's really where I encourage women to reconnect with themselves.
And I think that's where you're coming in. You're helping, if they want to go to another level to get help, you're helping them as a leadership coach.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
So where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, the best place to go if you want to go to my website to learn more about me or my programs is KelliRaeThompson.com. I'm Kelly with an I, and then it's RAE. Otherwise, the two places I love to hang out the most are Instagram, and I'm at Kelli Rae Thompson, and LinkedIn. I'm / Kelli Rae Thompson as well. And so on my website, if you go to the downloads tab, there's a bunch of free things you can download too: a salary negotiation guide, a career clarity guide, and there's just some fun stuff on there for you. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
And for the listeners, I'm going to have all the links that she just mentioned in the description, just in case. Anyway, this is really, really, really helpful, Kelli. And I'm so glad that you're helping people, especially women.
Thank you. It's been so fun to talk about this with you. And thank you for all of your support.
No problem. Have a great day, everybody.